Hello everyone, welcome to Katharine's Creatures. This is episode 47, and this is a series where we get a touch base and talk about various mythological beast, beings, and the like, pulled from lore worldwide. And I like to preface by saying that I am not a linguist, so there is always a chance that I will mispronounce something, and I always apologize in advance. I do try, but there is that chance. So this week I kind of wanted to talk about a creature from Jewish folklore, and this one is the Golem. And again, not the Golem you might think if you know Tolkien and The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but kind of where that namesake was taken from. Now, the Golem in Jewish folklore is a animated, anthropomorphized creation. It's actually more often than not described as built out of mud or clay initially before it's animated, and again it looks human-like, but never is exactly human enough to qualify. It's a non-living thing in most lore. Now, the most famous Golem stories come from a narrator who was, let's see if I pronounce his name right, it was Judah ben Bezalel? Hopefully I got that right, or close enough, who lived in the late 16th century and was a rabbi of Prague at the time. And so he wrote down the story of the Golem of Prague, which I'll get to in a little bit. But kind of jumping back to the beginning, one of the earliest references to the word golem was from the Bible in Psalm, let me look this up, 139:16. And in that one there is the word golem, which kind of loosely translates my light form or raws and raw material, and kind of implying that it is an unfinished human in the eyes of God. Modern Hebrew actually uses the word golem which translates roughly dumb or helpless. It also can be used to describe a certain stage in the development of an insect between larvae and adult, where it's very inanimated. So again, kind of this slow, sluggish, not fully evolved entity, creature. So, the Golem. Now, in early Judaism, there's a text called the Talmud, and in that text there's the words golem are applied to Adam, the first man, because he was initially created to be kind of like a golem, formed out of mud by God. And so again, giving reference or an idea that is why all other golems are formed out of mud and dirt and clay, because the first time a golem was there was Adam by the Creator. So also early golems in lore weren't able to speak. So it was a good identifier that even though some of them may look very, very human-like, they're not able to vocalize, or at least turn thoughts into words that we can understand. By the time the Middle Ages rolled around, as most things go, the idea of the golem started evolving. And at that point, there were a lot of stories that refer to the fact that a golem could be animated by inserting something called a shem in their mouths, and that is a piece of parchment or paper that contained ritualistic lettering in the Hebrew alphabet, and again it's inserted in the mouth to activate the creature. By the time some of the Polish tales evolved and kind of got a hold of this idea, as well as the Brothers Grimm, that concept of activating the golem had changed yet again, and this time it included or referenced the fact that Hebrew words were kind of inscribed upon the forehead of the golem, and certain ones needed to be used, including like the words like truth. And in one very striking reference, they're saying that, you know, the word truth and all these words in Hebrew inscribed, all of a sudden the creature starts moving about, and then to deactivate it, you would switch the word for truth to that of the word for death, which were very similar in the writing. And once that occurs, the golem would deactivate and just kind of stay still or puddle, depending on your lore. Now, golems have been used throughout, like I said, history, and the stories always are evolving, one of which actually did include a female, quote unquote, at least female shaped golem, which was created for the sole purpose of doing household chores. So if you ever think of people always talking about, I've heard a few times where, why don't we create robots to do the chores or daily stuff that you don't want to do? Wouldn't it be nice if someone could, take some of that day-to-day stressors off of you? Well, back in the day it was the same. And so the concept of, wouldn't it be nice to create a not really living entity to do some of the household chores? Thus the golem. Well, kind of now going to the Golem of Prague. Again, this is probably one of the most famous stories. And in that story, the golem was created. And the particular golem had special abilities. It could turn invisible. It could summon spirits of the dead. So a very, very powerful form of golem. And its creator would actually deactivate it every Friday so that it would rest or be inactive during Saturday, which is the Sabbath, and then reactivate it on Sunday and let it progress through the week. Now, this is kind of where the story kind of subdivides. One version says that obviously one day its creator forgot to do what he was supposed to do and the golem was not deactivated on the Sabbath. Another version said the golem actually developed feelings for human and being non-human was rejected. Regardless of which story you prefer, the golem goes on a murderous rampage and needs to be stopped. The creator captures him in front of a synagogue and deactivates him right at the stoop of the synagogue, causing the golem to fall to pieces. Those pieces were collected and kind of stored away if ever it was needed to be reactivated again, and then the story goes on and on from there. But, the golem is something that I think, for me, one of the first times I ever heard the name was Tolkien, and a totally different creature outside of the name. And you might, you could argue some of the reasonings why Tolkien used the word golem for his golem, be it the fact that it was a creature that changed from another, was less than what he started out being a obsessed entity of its own sort and wasn't capable of fully living without its obsession. But anywho, golems, be it in fantasy, more modern retellings, or true to mythology, are pretty kind of interesting creatures, and I am writing about them in some of my books too, just because I do love them. So if you have any questions about this or anything else, post them in the comments below or message me on social media. And until next time, Skål.